Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's a real pleasure of mine tonight because of what's been going on in Canada for the last couple of weeks to introduce you tonight to the Mayor of Windsor, Drew Dilkens. Drew, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks very much, Brian. Doing better this week than last.
You've had quite the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something we've ever had to do in my memory, having lived here my whole life. It's not a problem we've experienced before in this way. And certainly a unique time in which we live. None of us have had to live through a pandemic either, but here we are.
So let's go through some of the facts. So number one, is the Ambassador Bridge open for business today?
It is open. Police have control of the roadway. There's lots of resources on the ground. Jersey barriers have been set up for about 2 kilometers in order to control access to and from the Ambassador Bridge. And so the short-term solution is in place. It can't be allowed to be this way forever. We won't have all of these police resources, and we can't keep all the Jersey barriers up along this route forever. But today it's open. It's a good sign. When you see trucks going across that border, it's a good sign for Canada's economy.
Now, I've been downtown Windsor. I've been to the Ambassador Bridge. It's part of downtown, is it not?
It's not part of downtown. It's closer to the west side of the city, but if you were in the car from the downtown driving, it would take you maybe 5 minutes to get to the Ambassador Bridge.
But it's got to have cut off residents' ability to get around their town, no?
It certainly has impacted folks who live on the west side of our city. They are the ones most deeply impacted in terms of their movements back and forth. There are some routes they could take, but it's not life as normal for those folks. And so we appreciate that this is a difficult situation, and I know they appreciate the importance of the Ambassador Bridge and this trade route for employment in the community. And we're going to find a pathway forward, because the short-term solution here, although it's effective, it's not one that we can have in place for very long.
The police, is it Windsor Police that have secured the bridge now, or OPP? And I saw on the weekend London Police having quite a presence.
You have had a mix of police officers from various police services all across Canada who have arrived. And so many from the OPP and Ontario services, the RCMP sent in public order units and other support. And so there was no shortage of folks here to be able to support the Windsor Police's effort to get this border crossing reopened and remove the illegal blockade.
How many people have been arrested?
Around 40, as I understand, have been arrested. People who were just non-compliant. There was no violence and no injuries, so that was a positive that came out of it. But about 40 people were willing to go to the line and get arrested for this particular cause.
I think a lot of us were shocked when we saw a cache of armaments and munitions in Coutts in Alberta. Any of that found in Windsor?
Not like that. Someone who was arrested did have weapons charges and allegedly had a weapon on them. So I think they're still in custody. And so not to the same extent, but that is disturbing. And frankly, when you see that underscores some of the concern that police had in the very early days of this blockade, where you had people on the ground here saying that they were willing to die for this cause. And that certainly sets the temperature and the tenor of a police response when you have people are hardened like that, and are willing to perhaps go to the nth degree for whatever cause it was they're fighting for. And so police took a very measured response. We made sure we had enough resources here before they were able to move in and remove the blockade. But again, at the end of the day, the goal was a peaceful resolution, and that's what we ended up getting.
Now, initially, I think all of us were told, at least the media was representing, that this were unvaccinated truckers, that were international truckers, that because of mandates put in place by both the Canadian government and the US government, could no longer ply their trade and were out of work, therefore, because they couldn't go from Canada to the United States with trucks. And then later on, we found out that there were a lot of people that weren't truckers that might have been involved and never had been truckers, and then that there were potentially extremists that were in the group. What's your sense? Were the people that had occupied the Ambassador Bridge truckers that were negatively impacted by this international mandate that demanded that to go to the United States as a commercial trucker, they needed to have a vaccine? And more importantly, to come back to Canada, they also had to have a vaccine.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I would say that if we looked at the plus or minus 100 vehicles that were part of this blockade, maybe 10%, 15% of the most were trucks. The rest were pickup trucks and other vehicles. And so I have described from the very beginning, I've described this as really having nothing to do or very little to do with vaccine mandates and mask mandates and anything to do with the pandemic. This was more like a G20 meeting or a G7 meeting where you just have anti-government protesters, people who are disgruntled at government for whatever reason, disgruntled at government at all levels, a bit of the anarchist sort of alt-right group on scene, and willing to, to presumably fight for their cause. Now, thankfully, that didn't happen, but this was way above and beyond what the original trucker convoy movement would purported to be.
We're chatting today with Drew Dilkens. He is the mayor of the city of Windsor. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with his worship, the mayor, in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Drew Dilkens. He is the mayor of the city of Windsor. He's had quite the week. We're going to go through some of the progression of what was going on for the week with the mayor in a minute. But I just wanted to let you know a little bit about this gentleman. You've been mayor for almost 8 years, so 2 terms. Your term is up in October. I won't ask you if you're going to actually. Are you going to run again?
Well, I'll give you the same answer that I give every media outlet who's asking, and that is I really love the job. I love the people in my city. I think we're making great progress, but you know what? I'm too busy worrying about delivering on my campaign commitments in 2018 to focus on what's going to happen in October of this year.
Okay, well, that's a definitive maybe. Before that, you were a lawyer with McTague Law Firm for 3 years. And actually before, in between that, you were city councillor for 8 years. So you've got a fair amount of experience on city council. You business development officer with the Canadian Consulate General, development officer with St. Clair College. You've got a law degree from the University of Windsor, an MBA from Wayne State, and a Bachelor of Commerce for the University of Windsor. And then you went and you did a DBA at the International School of Management in Paris, France. And you did a dissertation on the comparative analysis of municipal government in Ontario, pre-amalgamation and post-amalgamation. Wow. What a background. So 2 degrees, 1 degree, 3 degrees weren't enough for you. You hadn't got 4.
Yeah, well, education's important to me. It was important to my parents. They instilled that in me, and I continue to instill that in my own kids. I think, education certainly provides an amount of rigor that one has to go through, and hopefully a lot of understanding. And I think, whether it's this situation or so many others that we've seen playing out across the world, don't we need people who are able to comprehend, to better understand, to listen, and to think through different situations in an intelligent way? And I'm really a strong proponent of education at all levels.
Well, I'm struggling through my DBA at ISM myself, so maybe I'll have a follow-up call with you on to how the heck you actually have finished the thing. Plus, I'm really quite interested in the whole idea of amalgamation because it's an issue that I think is really relevant to regional government in Canada. But that's for another conversation at another time. So tell me, if you could, when did you first hear about what was going on at the Ambassador Bridge, and how did you hear about it?
Well, it was about a week ago, and on the weekend, so about 8 or 9 days ago, 10 days ago, the trucker convoy had rolled through the city of Windsor, about 850 vehicles, and they were doing a slow roll up and down the road called Huron Church Road, which leads to the Ambassador Bridge. It had been peaceful; they had not stopped. Clearly, the slow roll was not efficient for traffic movement, but they did leave a full lane open for trucks to be able to do what they needed to do to keep the crossing going. And so there was some intelligence. And of course, we're watching what's going on in Alberta and across the country at different locations, Ottawa. And there was some intelligence that police had gathered that said that it could come to Windsor in a way that becomes more like Ottawa, where there's a hard stop. The problem was the intelligence never indicated when, where, you have no idea if you've got 850 vehicles, whether they're going to remain, legitimate and legal, or whether they're going to all shut off at any given minute and decide to block the road. And so police, it's impossible to tell, and you've got to keep traffic moving on that roadway. And so all of a sudden it just happened, and police called saying, we've got a problem. And within an hour of the road being illegally blocked, Stellantis, which is our largest employer, we make the Chrysler Pacifica and the Chrysler minivan here in Windsor, had called saying, "What the heck is happening at the Ambassador Bridge?" And then it just sort of went from there. And from
That's
the very
interesting that
beginning,
an employer, a automotive company, was the first to feel the impact. So right away, they weren't getting deliveries.
so not that surprising to us, because the whole auto industry operates on a just-in-time delivery basis. All the suppliers, all of the networks, the supply chains that are built up on both sides of the border operate on just-in-time delivery, which means that parts that come from the manufacturers, the parts suppliers, are delivered to the plant hours before they're actually installed in the vehicles that roll off the assembly line. And so what happens is when there is a hard stop at the border, that impact is felt immediately. And oftentimes, if it's for any length of time, that impact is financially material.
We've heard some people say that there has been layoffs, there have been closures, there have been shifts that were canceled, and there has been negative economic impact. What's your sense of it?
On both sides of the border. And that happened immediately. You saw GM take action. You saw Ford shut down the engine plant here in Windsor. A lot of the suppliers started going down because there's no sense supplying if they don't know when the border is going to open, and they have to stockpile whatever they make because they can't deliver it. And it wasn't just auto. It was Vistaprint, 1,500 employees. It was it had ripples throughout the entire economy. Windsor is known as the auto capital of Canada, but what a lot of folks don't know is just 20 minutes away in Essex County, we are home to the largest greenhouse industry in North America. In fact, the second largest greenhouse industry outside of the Netherlands. And so all of that perishable food that crosses the border, supplying Costco's all throughout the United States and Canada, and all sorts of grocery store chains, gets delivered to warehouses and then shipped from sort of the greater Detroit area.
Do you think this experience will? Sorry, I apologize for interrupting you. Do you think this experience will change the attitude some American companies have to buying from Canada?
I'd like to think that it won't change, and I'd like to think that a 7-day hiccup will not disrupt in the auto sector, the better part of 120-year relationship where supply chains have been established. They're in normal times very efficient and effective. But at the same time, I'm not foolish enough to ignore the fact that in the United States right now, you still have very strong Buy America sentiment, and it ramps up, and it gives politicians on the other side of the border a chance to ramp up the rhetoric about the need to source supplies domestically, that being in the United States. And so, I like to think that things are open, things will get back to normal, and, life will go on after this 7-day experience. I'd like to hope that's the way it's going to happen. But clearly, you're going to have some folks thinking, what do we do if it happens again? How do we protect our own operation? And folks may make, decisions. And it's worth also saying that, all around the world, you have this massive shift in the auto sector to autonomous vehicles and the coding, especially on the battery electric side and the movement into that space. There is a global war for these plants, for this technology, for this investment. And the last thing we need in Canada right now is any reason for the folks who are site selecting to feel any level of discomfort with our ability to operate effectively.
It's got to be a huge impact negatively for the city of Windsor and your residents if anything like that happens. So let's roll back. So you hear that they're stopping, they're doing the slow roll down the road. You get a call from an auto company that what's happening to the Ambassador Bridge. You hear and find out that they're actually stopping things. What do you do? You're the mayor. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm also chair of the Police Services Board. So in contact immediately with the chief and the team at police saying, okay, what are we going to do, guys? You got to get these folks out of there. We're not going to become Ottawa 2.0 in terms of the protests there. And so police, of course, strategically went out, did their analysis of what they were dealing with. And it became clear very quickly that we do not have the resources on the ground to manage something like this. We do not have public order units in the city of Windsor because we almost never, I can't even think of a time when we've had public disorder where you'd need that type of specially trained unit to come in. And so right away, the media is calling, everyone's chatting. I'm sending messages up to the provincial government saying we've got an issue. And from day one, my messaging was we will need federal and provincial assistance to end this blockade. We will not be able to do this alone. And so the clock ticked a bit. Finally, resources started coming, and we asked for police resources from the province and from the federal government. They sent more than we asked for because they understood the importance of getting this open. But of course, once they determine what they're going to send, by the time you pull people from all across Ontario and all of the equipment that has to get here, and in some cases across Canada, because we had public order units from the RCMP here, it takes more than a day for everyone to get here. And so they started assembling, preparing their operating plans, and then they went out Saturday and started enforcing. And what happened on Saturday is they were making progress, moving the protesters back, and we were down to maybe 70 or 75 on site. And then what happened is we have a church group here locally who has been very, I would say, very disobedient since day one on any rules related to the pandemic, has not wanted to subscribe to any safe measures related to the pandemic. And so they put a call out to their congregation saying, come down and support this protest. So all of a sudden, people started coming down with young children. And what was a group of 75 became 600 by 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I suppose the operating decision from police was, we've got 100 officers out there in a line, and we're moving in slowly and methodically. Do they keep moving to a point where these young kids are going to see the bad decision of their parents in a very negative way and be sort of scarred by police action? And I think sensibly they said, you know what, wait for mom and dad to take Jimmy and Susie home because they have to go pee or they need to have dinner or they're cold. And let's get the kids out of here and then continue with the enforcement. And so that's basically what happened. The kids went home, and you think the police would move in at night, but what we saw here every night during the protest was as soon as it got dark, the protesters started getting into alcohol and drugs, and certainly police didn't want to get into a liquid courage type situation. And so they waited sensibly till morning, and then they were able to move in and disperse the remaining crowd on Sunday, and ultimately get the roadway open, take control of it, get the roadway open by Sunday night. That's
really concerning, your story about the local church that impeded operations for a day. The economic impact of that, the cost of policing of that has got to be substantial. Is there something you can and should do to discipline that pastor, that church, for what they did, which has dramatically negatively impacted what you had the right to do given the court order?
Well, I think a church relies on donations from their congregation to survive. And I think, this church certainly is financially stable with the folks that go there. And in fact, any attention we try and draw to them, and that's why I won't even give their name, but any attention we tried to draw to this organization may just get those who participated in the rally to become members, to join and link arms for the cause. And so, I'm just giving you the narrative of what happened, and it is concerning. I mean, the thought, as a parent myself, the thought of bringing your young children, I'm talking like 6 and 7 year olds, baby strollers in some cases, bringing them to this location when there's an active police movement to shut this it's an illegal blockade, to shut it down. The thought of bringing your kids there, I mean, it is unconscionable. That a parent would do that, but that is what played out on the streets here.
Well, I heard someone on TV last night talking about this Emergency Preparedness Act, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But they were saying that rather than just going after their trucks and their licenses, they should do exactly what you're talking about and bring in Children's Aid and interview these parents about what they're subjecting their kids to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it for people who are smarter than me to decide what to do on that. But I'll tell you, I mean, the community noticed. Many were just as dismayed, I guess is the way to describe it, dismayed that when you see that kind of thing happen. I think any sensible parent is saying, what the heck are you doing? And so it is what happened. And, police took a very measured approach, which was great. I emphasize no one got hurt, but we cannot have a 1 day, a 2 day, certainly cannot have a 7 day blockade at this international border crossing again.
Now, we've had convoys try to take over downtown Toronto and downtown Quebec City, and their police did something different. They blocked off roads. They brought in a lot more police presence, and those police forces are credited to being able to stop what happened before it took place. Why were they able to do it and Windsor was not?
Well, I'm not sure I have the fulsome answer for that. I mean, obviously they have more resources in a city like Toronto. You have more police resources on the ground. Perhaps their intelligence was stronger than ours. But the reality here is there is really only one practical way to the Ambassador Bridge and from the Ambassador Bridge. And so it's not like there are multiple pathways and, you could reroute traffic if you block down one road or another. It is almost 100 years old, and the road that leads to it is 100 years old. And so it's different than what's on the ground today is different than what's being built in the new border crossing just down the road with the Gordie Howe International Bridge that's well under construction as we speak. And I think the prospect of that happening on the Gordie Howe would be much different because it is not a municipal road. It is basically an extension of the 401. So you've got a provincial highway. And I think the response can be a lot different in that case than it is on a municipal road.
Let me ask you a question. I think that people have a charter right to protest. And we've talked about that, across Canada a fair amount in the last couple of weeks. But I don't think you have the right to use a big 18-wheel truck or, frankly, an SUV or a pickup truck to occupy places, to block places. And we've never sort of had that before. People, when they've protested, have come out themselves and they protest. And I think you have the right to do that. Do you think we need to do something different such that people don't have the right to use 18-wheel vehicles or pickups or SUVs in the future?
Well, I agree with you with respect to the right to protest. I mean, the hallmark of our democracy is that one can express themselves, you can protest, you can demonstrate, you can express your displeasure or your support of government decisions. And ultimately, if you really despise any elected person, you have the ability to go to a ballot box and make a different choice. And so I respect greatly our Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the way that our democracy is established here. And it's okay to protest. What's not okay is to illegally protest. And so there are limits on one's right to protest. I cannot walk into the Parliament buildings in the gallery and in the middle of the proceedings stand up and express myself. There's a reasonable limit on where and when I can express myself and protest. And clearly, I mean, from day one, this was an illegal blockade of a roadway leading to an international border crossing. It was never okay. And the thought when I hear and I see TV reports in Ottawa where the protesters are saying, "Oh, we're peaceful. We have bouncy castles and we're playing hockey in the streets, and leave us alone. This is a peaceful protest." No, it's not. This is an illegal occupation. You are not protesting. You are illegally occupying municipal roadways. You are disturbing neighbors and residents who live there. You are impacting businesses. In some cases, damaging, causing damage to businesses, lighting fires and things like that. None of that is okay. They've gone way above and beyond what a reasonable protest would be in our democracy.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Canada instituted the Emergency Preparedness Act. You in Windsor proved that you didn't need that to solve the problem. What do you think? Was that the right decision? Was that something that Ottawa and Coutts and other places need?
I think it's fair to say each of us has a little bit different authority with the emergency powers that we have. And so I signed the emergency declaration yesterday, but I signed that simply because there was no point signing it earlier. It might have sent a signal, but I already had everyone's attention. I didn't need to send a signal with respect to what was happening down here. That really would have conferred no additional authority to the mayor had I signed it earlier. Where the benefit of a municipal declaration comes into play is now that this is closed, this roadway is not closed, but it's blocked off for east-west traffic. There are a number of things that will have to be decided very, very quickly that would otherwise be wrapped up and conferred to city council. Moving bus routes, spending money to deal with traffic systems and technology. All of those things have to be decided very, very quickly, and we cannot go to and from city council meetings, hoping to get it on an agenda and make the decision 2 weeks from now. And so that's where the authority comes in, and it's useful. Is the emergency declaration allows me to act very, very quickly to make these decisions, and then report them out to city council so that they know what decisions have been made. When it comes to federal authority, it's a whole different level. He's the Prime Minister invoking the Emergencies Act. A lot actually give him some authority to start passing and offering legislative tools, hopefully that have send the right signal to people who are looking or contemplating replicating what happened down here or replicating an Ottawa type barricade elsewhere in the country, that there are going to be significant penalties. And I think I look at what Premier Ford did, very sensibly declaring the emergency declaration for Ontario, and immediately saying critical infrastructure, including border crossings and airports and ports, and many others, it is not okay to block it. If you do, you could lose your driver's license in perpetuity. You could lose your commercial vehicles operator registration, which is the ticket to earn a living as a truck driver. And you could be arrested, go to jail for a year, or have a $100,000 fine. Like those are clear, well understood sanctions that I think is going to give anyone cause to pause if they're contemplating doing this again.
Something around 80% of us in Canada have had one dose, almost 80% have had 2 doses, and something close to 56% or something like that have 2 doses plus a booster. Angus Reid came out with a poll that said something about 60-70% of Canadians support vaccine passport mandates and masking up and things like that. That said, there are 10% of the people in Canada, which is about 3.5 million people, that for whatever reason don't believe in this, haven't got a vaccine and oppose it. What would you say to those people?
There are some who have legitimate issues, either medical issues or religious accommodation. And from a municipal perspective, we've been able to deal with those folks and respect that there are some who just can't take it. There seems to be, my observation, that there is a whole group of individuals who just disagree with the science. And that's where it becomes a little more difficult when you have non-scientific people just objecting to the science that brought us to the vaccine, which has actually helped keep people alive. And so, it's hard for a sensible, reasonable person, I think, to understand how people could object to the science when I think every leader in every government around the world is subscribing to and promoting vaccination as a pathway back to normal. This isn't just the United States and Canada saying get boosted and there's objections in countries and other places. This is every leader in every country around the world saying get a vaccine because that's how you get out of a pandemic and move to the endemic stage. And so your point is well taken, that you have people who object to science and they don't have a scientific background, which makes it more challenging to try and get them on side. And then you have some who are just anti-government, don't like the government telling them what to do, and they just won't do it because it's being recommended by government. And those folks you're probably never going to get to. But I've tried on many occasions to have a reasonable, rational conversation with people who point out different issues with respect to science and try and give them sources that I think are credible, that are not sort of the Wikipedia type sources or the far right websites. And some people just won't believe you. They don't want to believe it. And on the municipal side, I mean, we have a vaccine mandate. So if you're not vaccinated, you have been terminated and you cannot be hired by the city of Windsor. And we have instances where we have individuals who, we're making almost $120,000 a year, have 3 or 4 young kids at home. He or she is the primary breadwinner for the family, and chose to lose that career. and the Green Shield benefits and the pension that come with it, chose to lose and walk away from all of that because of a belief that the vaccine would harm them. But it was just a personal belief, not founded in science and no religious exemption. So some people you just can't get to, even if you try hard. And we've tried very, very hard to give out good information. But in this case, it's proven that you just can't reach everyone with good information on this cause.
You said that almost every leader worldwide has been supporting vaccine mandates and vaccines and passports and masking. That's not quite true. There are some politicians and some leaders that aren't. And you actually had some politicians come out and support, and if not support, sort of encourage the truck protests that became occupations in the last couple of weeks. What do you think of those politicians, those leaders?
Well, I just want to be clear. My comment was really around vaccination, and I think, every world leader of every country has said that vaccination is a pathway through. Do you have different voices in elected offices across different countries who complain about restrictions, lockdowns, mask mandates, all of those things? Sure you do. And that's fine to have some of those conversations. Again, some of it's just not rooted in common sense. And, folks saying, you shouldn't wear a mask. If you were with a bunch of unvaccinated people, don't bother wearing a mask if you're in a concert hall, as an example, that it's not going to provide any benefit. And you just have to shake your head saying, well, I'm not a medical doctor, but I can appreciate that would provide some benefit if someone were COVID positive in a group setting. And so, listen, there are people who object to it. Many have intervened and tried to support the truck convoy through their comments, including Senator Ted Cruz and others in the United States. Former President Trump recommending people donate to the truck convoy in Canada. And, it's always interesting to me when you have politicians in one country trying to, assist a movement in another country. It's kind of odd to me. But when I was asked the question about Ted Cruz, I said, well, it's easy to be a champion for a protest 3,000 miles away, but I'd love to know what his impression would be if the border crossing between Mexico and the United States were blocked and had a $400 million a day economic impact to his state. I'm quite sure the response would be much different than the one he provided. And so,
he'd probably be in Cancun.
He'd probably be in Mexico, and as soon as he's caught, make his way back. But not everyone's acting sensibly here. I get it. And even if you're a politician, you don't have 100% of the politicians who are acting sensibly either.
Mayor, you and your police have solved the problem at Pier right now at the Ambassador Bridge. But there's people in Ottawa, there's truckers that are trying to cross the border in Coutts and in Manitoba, and some people that are feeling like government's lost its ability, police have lost their ability, municipal governments have lost their ability to really provide the services and the protection that we count on from them. Do you have a message for Canadians right now that are pissed off about what's going on in Canada?
Well, listen, my sense on the ground here is that people were very pissed off at the protesters. And I had said to the chief, and it was a quip, no doubt. It's certainly not one I ever meant to happen. Is that the fastest way to solve this protest would be to deputize every Windsorite who wanted these protesters to go away. It would have ended up in a very bad situation for the protesters. But that's the reality. The vast majority of people said, just go away. Like you are the alt-right fringe group. And you don't believe in science for the most part. And if you're unwilling to believe in science now, we're not sure we're ever going to be able to get to you. So I think the vast majority of Canadians, and you enunciated the percentage of people who are vaccinated and have made the decision. And I acknowledge that some of those folks probably did it. They didn't want to get vaccinated, but they did it because they didn't want to lose their job They wanted to be able to travel. They wanted to be able to go into restaurants and, have the privileges that came with vaccination. So I think the majority of those folks, especially after having gotten it, and the vast majority did not get sick, did not die. They're saying, guys, this has been a tough 2 years for everybody. Every single Canadian, whether you're the mayor of a city, whether you are a mom, who's trying to work from home, and you've got a kid who's 6 years old trying to learn reading and writing online with all of the distractions that come with that, not knowing whether your job is going to be on today or off tomorrow because of closures and shutdowns and lockdowns. There is not a single Canadian who hasn't felt the impact of the pandemic, the likes of which none of us have lived through before. And so I get it's been hard. And I think what we're seeing play out on the streets is, in some ways, there's a group who's been hit even harder by this, either mentally, physically, emotionally, job loss, whatever it is. And you see that playing out through some of these protests. And so, it's easy to sort of dismiss people, set people aside and ignore their position. I don't want to do that. I want to acknowledge that there's a group that is feeling disgruntled, because at the end of the day, if we snapped our fingers and this became an endemic tomorrow, if COVID became endemic tomorrow, we're going to have some amount of healing that reunites the country. And it'll be at the city level, the provincial level, the federal level. We'll have to bring these folks back in, because we can't have this type of polarization in our communities.
Drew Dilkens, Mayor of Windsor, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing with us your thoughts about what's going on. Can I ask you one last question? If
Sure.
In a day or two, you hear that the protests are coming back and they're going to try to block the Ambassador Bridge this coming weekend or something like that, what do you do?
Well, the police resources that were sent here, many of them are still here, and they will remain here to maintain the integrity of this important and crucial link to our international border, and they will be able to respond very, very quickly should that happen. And now with enhanced powers that are likely coming at the federal level with the Emergencies Act, and certainly with the powers granted by the Premier, they have some enhanced tools that will allow them to act very quickly. And there are some stiff fines, and that's in addition to the Chief Justice issuing an injunction for us as well down here. So there's lots at stake for those who wish to be non-compliant. You have a lot to lose now, and there will be no effort spared to make sure that any future sort of illegal blockade is dealt with swiftly and not be allowed to happen more than a matter of minutes as opposed to 7 days.
I got to tell you that I think a lot of Canadians were watching what was going on in Windsor, frankly, with pride this weekend, that different police forces came together and solved the problem in what would appear to be a completely peaceful but forceful and determined manner. And you opened up the bridge. And so I want to congratulate you and thank you and your police force for doing its job, but doing it incredibly well and incredibly peacefully. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm happy no one got hurt, that the border is open, and we will maintain this crucial link for our entire nation. It's just too important to see it close down again.
Drew Dilkens, Mayor of Windsor, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody.